She was on her knees in the middle of a supermarket, begging her 4-year-old to forgive her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," the mother whispered through tears. "There's no dinner tonight." What she didn't know was that a wealthy man standing at the end of the aisle heard every word. A man powerful enough to change lives. And before the night was over, he would make a decision that would shock everyone, including himself. If stories about love, family, and the quiet power of kindness still matter to you, please subscribe. Because sometimes the smallest moment becomes the turning point of a lifetime. It was Christmas Eve in Chicago. The store was glowing with lights. Holiday music played softly through the speakers. Families pushed overflowing carts filled with turkey, cakes, gifts, and bottles of sparkling juice. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread drifted through the air. And right in the middle of all that warmth and celebration stood Maddie Carter. 27 years old. Single mother. Exhausted. And completely broke. Her daughter, little Willa, held her hand and looked up with wide blue eyes. "Mommy, I'm hungry." 4 years old. And already learning what real hunger felt like. Not the kind of hunger that comes before dinner at a comfortable home. This was the deep, aching kind. The kind that made a child quiet instead of complaining. Maddie forced a smile that hurt her cheeks. "I know, baby. We'll eat soon, okay?" It was a lie. Another lie. She hated herself a little more every time she said it. They walked slowly past the bakery section. Willa stopped in front of a row of Christmas cakes wrapped in red and gold. "Mommy, can we get one? Like Grandma used to buy." The words hit Maddie like a knife. Grandma. 8 months ago, her mother had died after a long illness. That tiny apartment they'd shared was gone. The steady cleaning jobs Maddie once had disappeared when she missed work to take Willa to the emergency room during a seizure. Since then, everything had fallen apart. The apartment. The job. The savings. Now they slept in her late mother's old van, parked behind an empty lot where the winter wind pushed through the cracks at night. Maddie swallowed hard. "We can't today, sweetheart." Willa nodded. She didn't ask again. That hurt even more. They reached the recycling machine near the back wall. Maddie opened a small plastic bag and began feeding in aluminum cans. 1, 2, 3. Metal clanked inside the machine. 12 cans total. The screen flashed. $1.25. Maddie stared at the receipt. $1.25. On Christmas Eve. Behind her, families laughed as they passed by with carts full of food. Willa tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, can we buy food now?" Maddie looked down at her daughter. That trust in her eyes. That belief that Mom would always fix things. Her throat tightened. She took Willa's small hands and walked toward the produce section. Bright oranges and shiny apples were stacked high around them. Food everywhere. More than anyone could ever need. And none of it belonged to them. Maddie slowly lowered herself to her knees on the cold tile. "Willa, my love. Mommy has to tell you something." The little girl frowned. "Why are you crying?" Maddie hadn't even realized the tears were falling. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Tonight, there's no dinner." Willa looked around at the store. "But there's food here, Mommy." "Yes," Maddie said softly. "But it's not ours." The little girl didn't scream. She didn't throw a tantrum. She just stood there, lips trembling, tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. "I'm hungry, Mommy." Maddie pulled her into her arms and held her tightly. I know, baby. I'm so sorry." Around them, the world kept moving. Music played. Cash registers beeped. Holiday laughter echoed through the aisles. No one stopped. No one looked. Until a voice cut through the moment. "Ma'am." Maddie looked up. A store security guard stood over them, his expression impatient. "If you're not buying anything, you'll need to leave. You're bothering customers." The words stung more than the cold floor beneath her knees. Maddie wiped her face quickly and stood, pulling Willa close. "We're leaving." But before she could take a step, another voice spoke from behind them. "Lo, come." Confident. "They're with me." The guard turned. A tall man stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in a dark tailored coat that probably cost more than Maddie's car. Well-groomed. Clean. Composed. The kind of man people didn't argue with. The guard immediately straightened. "Oh, sorry, sir." He walked away without another word. Maddie turned slowly toward the stranger. Her instinct was immediate. Be careful. Men who looked powerful rarely helped without expecting something in return. "I don't know who you are," she said carefully. "We don't need." The man didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Willa. Then he did something that made Maddie freeze. He stepped forward and lowered himself to one knee, right there on the supermarket floor. His voice softened. "Hi," he said gently. "I'm Dominic." He looked into Willa's tear-filled eyes. "If you could eat anything tonight, what would you choose?" Willa looked at her mother first. That silent question. "Is it safe?" Maddie hesitated. Her pride screamed no. But her daughter's empty stomach answered for her. She gave the smallest nod. Willa turned back to the man and whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Mac and cheese, with bacon." Dominic nodded once. Not like a favor. Like an order. He stood, reached for a shopping cart, and began walking down the aisle. Maddie hesitated. Something about this felt unreal. Too sudden. Too easy. Too dangerous. But Willa had already taken a small step forward to follow him. And Maddie realized something that made her heart pound. For the first time in weeks, her daughter looked hopeful. And she didn't yet know that this quiet moment in a supermarket was about to change all three of their lives forever. And the man pushing that cart was not just a wealthy stranger. He was a man with power. The kind of power that could protect or destroy. Maddie walked behind the cart slowly, her hand wrapped tightly around Willa's shoulder as if the moment might disappear if she let go. Dominic didn't rush. He moved through the aisles with quiet certainty, stopping wherever Willa's eyes lingered. They passed the juice section. Willa looked at the orange juice cartons, then quickly looked away, the way children do when they've learned not to want things. Dominic reached out and placed a small bottle into the cart. No comment. No big gesture. Just quiet understanding. Maddie felt her throat tighten. They walked past the bakery again. The same shelves that had broken Willa's heart earlier. This time, the little girl reached out and gently touched a package of chocolate cookies, her fingers brushing the plastic like it was something fragile. She didn't ask. She didn't even look at her mother. Dominic saw it. The cookies went into the cart. Milk, bread, eggs, fresh fruit, cheese, peanut butter, jam. Everything Willa paused near, everything her eyes rested on for even a second, found its way into the cart. Maddie followed in silence, her emotions twisting together in a way she couldn't sort out. Relief, gratitude, shame, and something else. Fear. Because kindness this big from a stranger never came without a reason. Not in her experience. Not after everything life had taught her. When they reached the checkout, the cashier began scanning the items. The total climbed higher and higher. Maddie's hands started to shake. "Sir, this is too much," she finally said quietly. "We don't need all this." Dominic didn't even look at the screen. "No child needs to wonder where their next meal is coming from," he said calmly. He handed over a black card. The machine beeped. The receipt printed. Just like that, it was done. 4 heavy bags were placed into the cart. Willa climbed inside among the groceries, hugging the orange juice to her chest like it was treasure. And for the first time that night, she smiled. A small smile. But real. Outside, the Chicago wind cut sharp through the parking lot. Snow drifted across the asphalt under the yellow lights. Maddie pulled her thin coat tighter around Willa. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above the wind. "I don't even know how to repay you." Dominic looked at the coat, looked at Willa's red hands, looked at the way Maddie stood between him and her daughter, protective even while accepting help. Then he spoke like he was offering something ordinary. "Have dinner with me." Maddie froze. Her instincts screamed. "No, this is how it starts. Help. Kindness. Then expectations." "I appreciate what you did," she said carefully. "But we should go." Dominic didn't argue. Instead, he said quietly, "Where are you going?" The question landed heavier than she expected. She hesitated. She could lie. She could say home. But she'd been lying to her daughter all week. She couldn't do it again. "We're staying in a van," she admitted, her voice flat. "Behind an empty lot." Dominic didn't react with shock. Didn't show pity. Didn't ask why. He just nodded once, like he was filing the information away. "The restaurant is 15 minutes from here," he said. "Warm. Quiet. You and Willa can eat there." Maddie looked at him, searching his face for something, anything that felt wrong. There was nothing there. Just calm. Just patience. Willa tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm really hungry." Pride lost again. Her child won. The black Mercedes was warm. Warmer than any place Maddie and Willa had been in weeks. Willa fell asleep halfway through the ride, her head resting against her mother's chest. They stopped in front of a small Italian restaurant tucked between 2 buildings. Soft yellow light glowed through the windows. The smell hit Maddie the moment they stepped inside. Garlic. Butter. Tomato sauce. Real food. A woman in her 50s came out from the kitchen, flour dusted across her apron. She looked at Dominic, then at Maddie and Willa. She didn't ask questions. "Back table," she said simply. "It's warm there." Maddie sat down slowly, like she didn't trust the chair to hold her. Willa stared at the plate placed in front of her minutes later. Mac and cheese. Bacon on top. Steam rising. She didn't touch it at first. She looked at her mother. Then at Dominic. Then back at the food. Finally, she took a small bite. Then another. Then faster. Like she was afraid someone might take it away. "Slow down, sweetheart," Maddie whispered, gently touching her hand. "No one's taking it." Willa looked up, her mouth full, her eyes shining. "This is the best thing I ever ate, Mommy." Maddie bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. 4 years old. And this was the best thing her child had ever tasted. Dominic sat across from them with an espresso he hadn't touched. He didn't eat. He just watched. Not with pride. Not with pity. With something quieter. Something heavier. After a while, Willa's eyes began to close. Her full stomach pulled her into sleep. She leaned against her mother, still holding her spoon. The restaurant grew quiet. Dominic lowered his voice. "After tonight," he asked softly, "where will you go?" Maddie looked down at her daughter's sleeping face. She could lie again. But she was tired of pretending. "Back to the van." Dominic nodded slowly. Then he said something that made her heart stop. "There's an apartment above this restaurant," he said. "Small. 1 bedroom. Hot water." Maddie looked up sharply. "I'm not offering charity," he added calmly. "The restaurant needs help. server, kitchen work, $15 an hour, plus tips. He placed a business card on the table. You work. You get paid. You stay. He stood, buttoned his coat, and looked once more at Willa sleeping against her mother. Merry Christmas. Then he walked out. Just like that. No pressure. No conditions. No waiting for an answer. Maddie sat there for a long time, staring at the card in her hand. The paper felt light, but the decision it carried felt heavier than anything she had ever held. Because she didn't just see a job. She saw a door. And she didn't know if walking through it would save them, or pull them into something she didn't understand yet. That night, the van felt colder than it ever had before. Maddie sat in the driver's seat with her knees pulled up under her thin blanket, the business card still resting in her hand. The glow from her cracked phone screen lit her face as she stared at the name printed in bold letters. Dominic Kane. She typed it into the search bar. At first, the results looked normal enough. Business owner. Restaurant chain. Real estate investments. Photos of him at charity events, standing beside local officials, smiling politely in tailored suits. A successful man. A respectable man. But then she scrolled. And the tone changed. Articles with careful wording. Phrases like alleged connections. Investigations. No charges filed. Witnesses declined to testify. Nothing proven. Nothing clean either. Maddie turned the phone off. Darkness filled the van again. In the rearview mirror, Willa slept curled up in the back seat, hugging the stuffed bear she'd carried since her grandmother's house. Her breath fogged the cold glass with each slow exhale. Maddie stared at her daughter for a long time. Her mind wasn't thinking about the articles anymore. It was remembering. The last man who had seemed safe. The one who had opened doors for her. The one who had promised, "I'll take care of you." The first slap had come 6 months later. The first time he hit her, he cried afterward. Said he was sorry. Said it would never happen again. It always did. Her hand moved to her wrist, rubbing the faint scar she still kept hidden under long sleeves. Trust had almost killed her once. But then she looked back at Willa. At the thin coat. At the way her daughter slept curled tight, even in her dreams, like she was still cold. The next morning, at 8 o'clock, Maddie stood outside the restaurant door. Willa held one hand. Her stuffed bear was tucked under her arm. Maddie took a breath. Then she pushed the door open. The woman from the night before stood behind the counter wiping glasses. She looked up, and there was no surprise in her expression. Like she'd expected this. "You came," she said simply. "I need the job," Maddie answered. The woman nodded once. "Start today. 10 in the morning to 9 at night. 15 an hour, plus tips. You work hard, you stay. You bring trouble, you're out. I don't run a charity." Maddie swallowed. "I won't bring trouble." The woman studied her for a moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small brass key. She placed it on the counter. "Apartment upstairs. Not big. But it's warm. Hot water. Door locks." The words hit Maddie harder than anything else. Door locks. She picked up the key. It felt heavier than it looked. Upstairs, the apartment was small. 1 bedroom. A worn sofa. A tiny kitchen with chipped cabinets. But it was clean. And sunlight came through the window. Real sunlight. Willa ran from room to room, touching everything. "Mommy, is this ours?" Maddie knelt down in front of her, holding her small hands. "Yes, baby. It's ours." Willa threw her arms around her neck. That first night, Willa slept on a real bed. Clean sheets. A thick blanket. She didn't wake up shivering. She didn't ask why it was so cold. Maddie sat beside her for a long time, afraid that if she fell asleep, the apartment would disappear. Work started the next morning. The hours were long. Her feet hurt. Her back ached. But every dollar she earned went into her pocket. Earned. Not given. That mattered to her more than anything. At the end of her first day, she stopped at a small grocery store and bought milk, eggs, bread, and a banana. When she set them on the table, she just stood there staring. Food that she had bought herself. "Mommy, can I have the banana?" Willa asked. Maddie smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. It's yours." Days turned into weeks. Life slowly began to feel steady. Dominic came into the restaurant a few times each week. He would sit at the back table, drink an espresso, look over papers, and leave. When Maddie passed by, he gave a small nod. He never asked questions. Never tried to talk. Never acted like he expected anything in return. That distance made her trust him more than kindness ever could. But Willa didn't keep distance. Every time Dominic walked in, she peeked at him from behind the counter. If he looked her way, she would hide, then peek again a few seconds later. One afternoon, the restaurant was quiet. Dominic sat at his usual table. Willa stood 3 steps away, holding her stuffed bear. She stared at him for almost a full minute before speaking. "Hi." Dominic set his espresso down. "Hi." She held the bear up. "This is Biscuit. He's my best friend." Dominic looked at the worn toy with complete seriousness. "Nice to meet you, Biscuit," he said. "You look like someone who takes his job very seriously." Willa smiled. A real, bright smile. From behind the counter, Maddie watched that moment. And her heart did something she wasn't ready for. It softened. Weeks passed. One afternoon, an old pink bicycle appeared behind the restaurant. The owner said it had belonged to her granddaughter. Willa stared at it like it was something magical. Dominic happened to arrive that day. He saw her standing beside it, unsure. "Want to try?" he asked. She nodded. He held the back of the seat as she wobbled forward, his long stride keeping pace behind her. When she fell and scraped her knee, he dropped to one knee immediately, pulling a bandage from his pocket. "You okay, princess?" he asked gently. She sniffed and nodded. "Let's try again." From the upstairs window, Maddie watched. Her fingers tightened on the frame. Because for the first time in her daughter's life, she was watching a man run behind a bike, holding the seat, encouraging her, like a father. And that scared her more than anything else. Because hope was dangerous. Hope meant something could be taken away. That night, Willa handed Dominic a drawing. 3 stick figures. 1 tall man. 1 woman. 1 little girl. Above them, a house. Dominic looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and put it inside his coat. Later that night, as Maddie tucked Willa into bed, the little girl asked quietly, "Mommy, is Dominic our friend?" Maddie hesitated. She didn't know how to answer. Because somewhere deep inside her, the question wasn't what frightened her. It was what might happen if the answer became yes. That night, after Willa fell asleep, Maddie sat alone at the small kitchen table upstairs. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant clatter of dishes from the restaurant below. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light across the table, but the corners of the room stayed shadowed. She kept hearing the same question in her mind. Is Dominic our friend? It should have been a simple answer. But nothing in Maddie's life had ever been simple when it came to men. Friend. That word carried weight. Friend meant trust. Friend meant safety. And the last time she had believed a man was safe, she had ended up on a kitchen floor, shielding her stomach while someone she loved kicked her down a flight of stairs. Her fingers moved unconsciously to the scar on her wrist again. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered softly into the quiet room, almost like a prayer. "Don't let me be wrong again." The days that followed felt normal on the surface. Work, tips, groceries. Willa's laughter returning in small pieces. Dominic still came in a few times each week. He kept his distance the same way he always had. A nod. A quiet hello. Nothing more. But Willa was growing braver. One afternoon she climbed onto the chair across from him without asking and opened a picture book. "Read it," she said, like it was an order. Dominic looked up at Maddie first. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He read. His voice was low and steady, awkward at first, like he wasn't used to reading to children. But when he reached the part about the dragon, he lowered his voice into a deep growl. Willa burst into laughter. The sound filled the restaurant. Maddie stood behind the counter, holding a tray, watching them. And for a moment, something inside her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain. Because it looked like something she had never had. Peace. That night, after closing, Maddie went downstairs to grab a forgotten apron. The restaurant lights were off except for a small glow coming from the back office. She slowed when she heard voices. Dominic's voice. But it didn't sound like the one that read bedtime stories. This voice was cold, sharp, controlled. "If the shipment comes in late again, handle it," he said quietly. Another man answered from inside the room. "What about the South Side issue?" A pause. Then Dominic's voice again, even quieter. "If he keeps pushing, I'll deal with him myself." Maddie froze in the hallway. Her heart began to pound. She hadn't meant to listen. But she couldn't move. Because suddenly the articles she had read weeks ago didn't feel distant anymore. They felt real. The office door shifted slightly, and light spilled across the floor. Maddie stepped back quickly and walked toward the stairs as quietly as she could. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the apartment. Willa was asleep, curled around her stuffed bear, her breathing soft and steady. Maddie sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her. That man downstairs read stories. Bandaged scraped knees. Bought colored pencils instead of expensive toys so it wouldn't hurt her pride. And yet, there was another side. A world she didn't understand. A world that sounded dangerous. Her eyes moved around the small room. The warm blankets. The groceries in the kitchen. The locked door. All of it existed because of him. Slowly, she stood and pulled a small bag from the closet. She folded 2 outfits for Willa. Packed her birth certificate. The little envelope where she kept her savings. Her hands moved quickly, automatically. Run. That instinct had saved her before. Run before something goes wrong. Before kindness turns into control. Before safety turns into a trap. She zipped the bag and turned toward the bed. Willa was sleeping peacefully, her cheek pressed into the pillow, her small hand wrapped around Biscuit. Her lips moved slightly. "Daddy." The word was barely a whisper. Maddie froze. Her chest tightened. If she left tonight, they would be back in the van. Back to the cold. Back to counting coins. Back to empty stomachs. She looked at the bag. Then at her daughter. Then back at the bag. Slowly, her shoulders dropped. She placed it back in the closet. And sat down on the floor beside the bed, pulling her knees to her chest. She stayed there for a long time. Because now she understood the truth. She wasn't choosing between safe and dangerous. She was choosing between 2 different kinds of risk. The risk of his world. Or the certainty of the one they had already survived. The next few days, Maddie avoided Dominic. When he came in, she stayed in the kitchen. If he spoke, she answered politely but quickly. No eye contact. No conversation. Dominic noticed. He didn't ask why. He didn't follow her. He didn't try to corner her or demand an explanation. Instead, he stopped coming as often. When he did, he sat farther away. He didn't read to Willa. He didn't linger. That distance hurt Willa more than anyone else. One evening she sat at the table coloring quietly, her small shoulders hunched. "Mommy," she asked softly, "did I do something wrong?" The question hit Maddie like a punch. "No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "Because Dominic doesn't talk to me anymore." Maddie swallowed hard. "You didn't do anything wrong." That night, after Willa went to sleep, Maddie went downstairs. The restaurant was closed. Only one light was on. Dominic sat alone at the back table, a stack of papers in front of him and an untouched cup of espresso beside his hand. He looked up when she approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maddie took a breath. "I heard you," she said quietly. Dominic didn't ask what she meant. He just waited. "The night in the office," she continued. "I heard the way you talk when it's not about stories or kids." Silence stretched between them. "Who are you really?" she asked. Dominic leaned back slightly in his chair. His answer came calm. "I'm someone whose world isn't clean." Maddie's hands tightened at her sides. "I have a daughter," she said. "If anything from your world ever comes near her, we're gone." No warning. No explanation. Dominic held her gaze. "If that ever happens," he said quietly, "I won't let you leave alone. I'll make sure you're safe first." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't a promise meant to impress. They sounded like something he had already decided. Maddie studied his face. For the first time since she had come here, she saw it clearly. Not just the confidence. Not just the control. But something else. Loneliness. And a tired kind of honesty. After a long moment, she nodded once. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Just a decision. The next afternoon, when Dominic walked into the restaurant again, Willa ran straight toward him. He hesitated for a second, then slowly knelt down. And when she handed him biscuit, he took the bear carefully in both hands. Like it mattered. Like it always had. But none of them noticed the man sitting at a corner table near the window. Watching. Listening. And staring at Maddie with a smile she hadn't seen in 4 years. At first, Maddie didn't see him. The lunch rush had just started. Orders were coming in, plates moving out, the sound of dishes and quiet conversation filling the restaurant. But then something shifted. That feeling. The one her body recognized before her mind did. The feeling of being watched. She turned slowly toward the window. And her heart stopped. Brent. He sat at the corner table like he belonged there. Clean-shaven. Hair cut short. Wearing a jacket that looked newer than anything she had ever seen him wear before. But the eyes were the same. Red around the edges. Heavy. And that smile. That slow, crooked smile that had always come right before things went bad. Maddie's hands went cold. For a second, she couldn't breathe. 4 years. 4 years without a call. Without child support. Without a single question about his daughter. And now he was here. Willa was still standing beside Dominic, showing him something she had drawn. Dominic hadn't noticed yet. Maddie moved fast. She crossed the floor, her voice tight. "Willa, sweetheart, go upstairs for a minute, okay?" The little girl looked confused. "But I'm showing." "Now," Maddie said softly, but firmly. Willa hesitated, then nodded and ran toward the stairs, biscuit tucked under her arm. Dominic straightened slowly. "What's wrong?" he asked. Maddie didn't answer. She was already walking toward the corner table. Each step felt heavy, like she was walking back into a life she had barely escaped. Brent leaned back in his chair as she approached, looking her up and down. "Well," he said casually, "you look better than I expected." Maddie stopped a few feet away, keeping distance. "What are you doing here?" His eyes moved around the restaurant. "Nice place," he said. "Didn't think you'd land somewhere like this." Her voice stayed low. "You need to leave." Brent laughed quietly. "You don't get to tell me where I can go." His expression changed then. The smile faded. "I came to see my daughter." The words hit her like a slap. "You don't have a daughter," Maddie said. "You walked away." His jaw tightened. "She's still mine." Before Maddie could respond, a chair moved behind her. Dominic stepped up beside her. Not touching. Not speaking. Just standing there. Brent looked him over slowly. "So this is him," Brent said. "The rich guy." Dominic didn't react. Brent leaned forward slightly. "You think you can buy your way into my family?" "She's not your family," Maddie said, her voice shaking now. "You lost that right a long time ago." Brent ignored her. His eyes stayed on Dominic. "You playing house with them?" Dominic's voice, when it came, was calm. "You need to leave." Brent laughed again. "And who's gonna make me?" The restaurant had gone quiet. Conversations slowed. People were watching. Dominic didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. But something changed in the air. Something heavy. Something final. "I'm asking once," he said. "Leave." Brent held his gaze for a long moment. Then he stood. For a second, Maddie thought he might swing. But instead, he stepped closer to her. Too close. His voice dropped. "You think this is over?" he whispered. "That's my kid. I've got rights." Maddie's stomach dropped. "I'll see you in court," he said quietly. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him, and the room slowly came back to life. But Maddie didn't move. Her hands were shaking. "Court." The word echoed in her head. Dominic turned to her. "Does he have any legal claim?" Maddie swallowed. "He's the biological father." Dominic nodded once. "That's enough for him to cause trouble." Upstairs, Willa's small footsteps came running down the hallway. She had heard the door slam. Her eyes went straight to Maddie. "Mommy, who was that man?" Maddie knelt down quickly, pulling her into a hug. "No one you need to worry about." But Willa pulled back slightly. Her voice was quiet. "He looked at me." Maddie froze. "He was watching me when I came down the stairs," Willa whispered. Maddie held her tighter. "It's okay. You're safe." But her own heart was racing now. Because she knew Brent. And Brent didn't make empty threats. That night, after the restaurant closed, Dominic sat across from Maddie at the back table. "What happened between you two?" he asked. Maddie stared down at her hands. She had never told him everything. Not the details. Not the worst parts. But now there was no point hiding it. "He used to hit me," she said quietly. "Started small. Then it got worse." Dominic didn't interrupt. "He kicked me when I was 7 months pregnant," she continued. "That's when I left." Her voice stayed steady, but her hands trembled. "He hasn't been around since. Not once. Until now." Dominic leaned back slightly. "If he files for custody, it becomes a legal fight," he said. "I know. And he'll use the fact that you're living here." Maddie looked up. "What do you mean?" Dominic's expression was calm, but serious. "He'll say you're dependent on someone with money. That this isn't a stable environment. That you moved your child into the home of a man you're not married to. The words hit hard. Because they weren't wrong. Maddie's voice came out small. Can he take her? Dominic didn't answer right away. He can try. Silence settled between them. Upstairs, the sound of Willa moving around her room echoed faintly through the ceiling. Maddie closed her eyes. I can't lose her, she whispered. Dominic's voice softened. You won't. She looked at him. You don't understand, she said. He doesn't want her. He wants control. If the court gives him any rights, he'll use her to hurt me. Dominic held her gaze. Then we don't let it get that far. Maddie studied his face. You said your world wasn't clean, she said slowly. I won't let you handle this your way. Something flickered in his eyes. Then we handle it your way, he said. The answer surprised her. No argument. No pressure. Just agreement. Later that night, as Maddie tucked Willa into bed, the little girl looked up at her with worried eyes. Mommy, is that man coming back? Maddie forced a smile. No, sweetheart. Willa hesitated. Then she asked the question in a small voice. Will he take me away? Maddie lay down beside her and pulled her close. No one is taking you anywhere. Willa nodded, but she didn't look convinced. That night, Maddie didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the street below. Every car that passed made her tense. Every shadow made her heart jump. And just after midnight, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She opened the message. You think the rich guy can protect you? Another message came seconds later. She's my daughter. I'm coming for her. Maddie stared at the screen. Then she looked toward Willa's bedroom door. And for the first time since the supermarket, she felt the same fear she had known in the van. Because this time, the danger wasn't hunger. It was someone who knew exactly how to hurt them. Maddie didn't reply to the message. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, then slowly lowered. There was nothing she could say that would make a man like Brent stop. Words had never worked with him. Apologies hadn't worked. Silence hadn't worked. Leaving hadn't worked. She locked the phone and sat there in the dark, staring at Willa's bedroom door. The apartment was quiet, warm, safe. But the feeling inside her chest was the same one she used to feel years ago. Like a storm was coming. And she had nowhere left to run. The next morning, she showed the messages to Dominic. He read them slowly, his expression calm, but the muscles in his jaw tightened. Save everything, he said. Every message. Every call. Don't delete anything. Maddie nodded. He showed up at the restaurant, she added quietly. And Willa says he was watching her. Dominic leaned back slightly. That's harassment, he said. And if he files for custody, this becomes evidence. Maddie wrapped her arms around herself. I don't trust the system, she admitted. People like him, they know how to lie. How to look normal. Dominic studied her for a moment. Then we don't rely on trust, he said. We rely on proof. There was a quiet strength in his voice. Not anger. Not revenge. Control. Later that afternoon, Maddie got another call. This time it wasn't from Brent. It was from Willa's preschool. Her stomach dropped the moment she saw the school's name on the screen. Hello. Ms. Carter, the teacher said carefully. I wanted to inform you that a man was standing outside the fence during recess today. He said he was Willa's father. Maddie's knees went weak. Did he talk to her? No. Security asked him to leave. But he stayed there for almost 20 minutes. Maddie grabbed her coat without thinking. I'm coming right now. She ran the whole way. By the time she reached the playground, Willa was on the swings, laughing with another child like nothing had happened. Like her world wasn't starting to shake again. Maddie rushed over and pulled her into a tight hug. "Mommy!" Willa laughed. "You're squeezing me." Maddie forced herself to loosen her grip. "Did you see a man outside the fence today?" she asked gently. Willa thought for a moment, then nodded. "The one from the restaurant," she said quietly. Maddie's heart dropped. "What did he do?" "He just watched," Willa said. "He didn't smile." That night, the fear changed shape. It wasn't just messages anymore. He was getting closer. The next text came at midnight. "I know where she goes to school." Maddie didn't sleep at all. The following morning, Dominic arranged for someone to sit in a parked car down the street from the preschool. "Nothing obvious," he told her. "Just someone watching." Maddie looked at him carefully. "You said we'd do this my way." "We are," he said calmly. "Your way means keeping her safe." She didn't argue. Because the truth was, she felt a little safer knowing someone was there. Days passed, and the pressure kept building. Then the envelope arrived. It was delivered to the restaurant during the lunch rush. Official. Stamped. From the county court. Maddie opened it with shaking hands. Petition for joint custody. Brent Carver was requesting shared parenting rights. Her vision blurred as she read the document. The language made him sound responsible. Stable. Reformed. He claimed steady work. A new apartment. A desire to reconnect with his daughter. And then she reached the part that made her stomach turn. His lawyer was questioning her stability. Living in property owned by a wealthy man. Financial dependence. An uncertain domestic environment. Maddie lowered the papers slowly. It wasn't about Willa. It was about making her look unfit. That evening, she sat across from Dominic again, the documents spread out between them. "He's going to use you against me," she said quietly. Dominic read the pages without reacting. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "Raymond," he said, "I need you." The lawyer arrived the next morning. Gray suit. Calm voice. Sharp eyes. He listened carefully as Maddie explained everything. The messages. The school incident. The history. When she finished, he folded his hands. "Legally, the biological father has the right to request custody," he said. "But his history of violence and absence works in your favor." Maddie let out a small breath. Then he continued. "However, the other side will attack your living situation." She looked at Dominic. "What does that mean?" "It means," the lawyer said carefully, "they will argue this isn't a traditional family environment. That you're living with a man you're not married to. That the situation is unstable." Silence settled over the room. Then the lawyer spoke again. "If Mr. Kane were your legal husband, and if he were willing to adopt the child, the case would look very different." The words hung in the air. Maddie turned slowly toward Dominic. Neither of them spoke at first. Finally, the lawyer stood. "I'll give you two some privacy." The door closed behind him. The room felt very quiet. Maddie stared at the table. "I can't ask you to do that," she said softly. "That's not fair." Dominic didn't answer right away. Then he spoke. "What if it's not just for the case?" She looked up. His expression wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. "I've spent my whole life with people who fear me," he said quietly. "Respect, money, power. None of that is the same as being trusted." He paused. "The first time your daughter handed me that bear, she trusted me with something that mattered." Maddie's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to lose that," he finished. Her voice trembled. "The last man I trusted almost destroyed my life." Dominic reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand closed gently over hers. "I won't leave another scar," he said. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Maddie closed her eyes for a moment. Then she nodded. Yes. That night, when they told Willa, the little girl stared at them for a long second. Then she threw her arms around Dominic's neck. "I knew it!" she shouted. "Now you're really my daddy." She ran to get Biscuit and placed the worn bear carefully in his hands. "Hold him," she said seriously. "That means you have to stay." Dominic held the bear like it was something fragile, like a promise. And for the first time in months, Maddie felt something close to peace. But peace didn't last long. 3 days later, as the restaurant filled with customers during lunch, the front door slammed open so hard it hit the wall. And Brent's voice cut through the room. "I'm here for my daughter." The restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every plate paused halfway to a table. Brent stood just inside the doorway, shoulders wide, eyes sharp, the smell of alcohol already drifting across the room. Maddie froze behind the counter. For a second, her body went back 4 years. Cold kitchen floor. Heavy footsteps. No way out. But then something different happened. Dominic stepped forward. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just calm. He positioned himself between Brent and the counter, his presence quiet but solid, like a wall that didn't need to prove its strength. Brent laughed under his breath. "There he is," he said. "The rich hero." Dominic didn't react. "What do you want?" he asked evenly. Brent's eyes moved around the room, then back to Maddie. "I came to see my daughter," he said. "And this time, I'm not asking." Maddie's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "She's upstairs. And you're not going near her." Brent stepped forward. "You don't get to decide that. The court will." The word hung heavy in the air. Dominic didn't move. "Then you'll talk to the court," he said. "Not here." Brent smirked. "You think money makes you her father?" Dominic's answer came quiet. "No." That single word caught Brent off guard. "Being there makes someone a father," Dominic continued. "Not blood." Brent's expression hardened. "She's mine." And then he tried to move past him. Dominic's hand came up, stopping him with one firm step. No violence. No threat. Just certainty. "You're not going upstairs," he said. The two men stood face to face. For a long moment, it looked like Brent might swing. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice low and ugly. "This isn't over. I'll take her from both of you." Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The restaurant slowly came back to life, but the air felt different. He wasn't bluffing anymore. The court hearing came 2 weeks later. Maddie wore the only dress she owned that didn't look worn. Her hands stayed folded tightly in her lap the entire time. Dominic sat beside her, calm, steady, his shoulder just close enough that she could feel he was there. Across the room, Brent sat in a borrowed suit, looking cleaner than he had in years. For the first time since he came back, he looked like a man trying to play the role of a good father. His lawyer spoke about rights, about second chances, about stability. Then Dominic's lawyer stood. Police reports, medical records, photos, 4 years of absence, threatening messages, witness statements. The truth didn't come out loudly. It came out piece by piece. Quiet, heavy, impossible to argue with. Then the judge asked the question no one expected. "I'd like to speak with the child privately." Maddie's heart dropped. Willa was brought into the room. Small blue dress. Hair neatly tied. Biscuit held tight in her arms. She looked at her mother. then at Dominic. He knelt down in front of her. "Remember what we talked about," he said softly. "Just tell the truth." She nodded. Inside the private room, the judge spoke gently. "Do you know why you're here, sweetheart?" Willa nodded. "The man wants to take me." The judge paused. "Where do you feel safe?" Willa didn't hesitate. "With my mommy. And my daddy." The judge smiled slightly. "Your daddy." Willa held Biscuit tighter. "He reads to me. He fixed my bike. He holds my bear careful. He doesn't make mommy cry." There was a long silence after that. When the hearing ended, everyone stood. The judge spoke clearly. Full custody remains with the mother. The petition for shared custody is denied. The court also grants adoption approval. Maddie didn't realize she was crying until Dominic's hand closed gently around hers. Across the room, Brent stared in disbelief. For the first time, there was nothing left for him to fight. He walked out without saying a word. That day changed everything. Months passed. The apartment became a house. Not big, not flashy, but warm. A yard. A small bedroom with stars on the ceiling. A place where Willa could leave toys on the floor without worrying they'd have to pack and leave. One evening, as the sun set through the kitchen window, Willa rode her bike across the driveway, wobbling but determined. "Look, Daddy!" she shouted. Dominic jogged behind her, one hand ready but not holding. "You've got it," he called. Maddie stood on the porch, watching. The same way she had watched from that upstairs window months ago. Only this time, she wasn't afraid. Because she knew the difference now. This wasn't hope that could disappear. This was a life they had built. Slowly. Carefully. Together. That night, after dinner, Willa fell asleep halfway through a bedtime story, Biscuit tucked under her arm. Dominic adjusted the blanket and turned off the light softly. When he stepped into the hallway, Maddie was waiting. For a moment, they just stood there. Then she said quietly, "That night in the supermarket, I thought I had nothing left to give my daughter." Dominic shook his head. "You gave her the most important thing." "What?" "You didn't give up." Maddie looked toward Willa's door, then back at him. And in that quiet moment, she understood something that took her years to learn. Love isn't proven by money, or promises, or blood. Love is proven by who stays, by who shows up, by who protects what matters most, even when it costs them everything. Because in the end, wealth didn't save her. Pride didn't save her. What saved her was one man who chose kindness over power. And one little girl who believed in him enough to hand him a worn-out teddy bear and say, "Hold this for me." Sometimes the strongest families aren't the ones we're born into. They're the ones we choose. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness on an ordinary night becomes the moment that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories about love, hope, and second chances. And tell us in the comments, which region are you watching from?